Signal Sports Central will be over March Madness game preview and prediction on the Elite Eight matchup between the Villanova Wildcats and the Houston Cougars. Both teams coming off of massive wins in the Sweet 16. Villanova beat the 11 seed Michigan, beat them by 8 on Thursday night, which was a huge win for the Wildcats. And here they are, sitting in the Elite Eight versus Houston. The Cougars, one of the hottest teams left in the tournament for sure, if not the hottest. They just knocked off Arizona, a number 1 seed, by 12. And Houston has been dominant in this tournament. They beat Arizona by 12. They beat Illinois previously, a 4 seed, by 15. Houston is definitely a major threat in this tournament right now. But at the same time, you got Villanova, who's been one of the most disciplined, one of the best teams, and a team that definitely does not shoot themselves in the foot very much. So definitely an interesting matchup. We'll be going over a full game preview and prediction on this matchup here today, starting out with your team trends. Villanova 29-7 overall heading into this matchup, 16-4 in conference this season, and 8-5 in games against the top 25. For Villanova, it's very well known that this team has played one of the toughest schedules in the nation. They've played 13 ranked teams over the course of the season, and they've overall performed really well, and that's why this team is a 2 seed, is because of how consistent this team is, plus how they've played down the stretch. A 29-7 record with as brutal of a schedule as Villanova's had is definitely very impressive. And if you look at Houston, 32-5 overall heading into this matchup, 15-3 in conference this season. And one of the main concerns for Houston going into the tournament was how weak of a schedule they had. They only played one ranked opponent over the course of the season versus Villanova, who played 13. So that's a huge difference, obviously, in Houston. It only shows, we've seen, once you get to the tournament, it's a whole different story. Like, it's a whole new season. It's a new start for everybody, and anything can happen. And Houston is looking like one of the best teams in this tournament right now for sure. They're playing as good as anybody, that's for sure. Beating Arizona by 12, and they just dominated the Wildcats of Arizona in that matchup in the Sweet 16. So, Houston, both these teams are definitely threats to win a national title. Both teams can do it, but, Houston in this tournament has been exceptionally impressive. Games will be on Saturday, March 26th in San Antonio. Your tip-off is 6:09 p.m. Eastern. Spread's going with Houston here by 2, so we do see the 5 seed being favored over the 2 seed here. Over-under is 128, so obviously it's going to be expected to be a defensive matchup, and it definitely should be. I don't expect anything differently. I think, you got 2 teams here that are excellent defensively, especially Houston. That is what they rely on, is their defense. If Villanova can get up into the 60s or the 70s point-wise, I'd probably say 70s or 80s point-wise, which is extremely unlikely. But if Villanova gets up there, it's going to be tough for Houston to be able to beat them, because, Houston's, their offense is okay, but their defense is really where their team thrives. So, we'll see what happens there. But your BPI is going Houston 65.2%, so the BPI is really going heavily on the Cougars in this matchup. And if you look at the tournament runs, Villanova beat Delaware by 20 in the first round. They beat Ohio State in the second round, 71-61, and beat Michigan by 8 in the Sweet 16. That Ohio State game was definitely an excellent one, and of course, Michigan having won 2 games going into that matchup was also huge as well. And so for Villanova, Michigan was they played very well in their first 2 games. So that was a good one there for the Wildcats. And then for Houston, beating UAB, beat them pretty handily. They beat Illinois and Arizona as well. That's quite an impressive resume so far in this tournament, knocking off a 4 seed in Illinois and a 1 seed in Arizona. Here's your stat comparison for this matchup. Villanova 72.6 points a game, 63.1 allowed, and their BPI is 6 versus Houston, who's got 75.8 points a game and then 58.9 points allowed. So you can see, Houston's defense is outstanding to say the least. They're allowing less than 60 points a game, which is, that's tough to do. And Houston's been doing it very consistently. And their BPI rank is 2. So actually Houston, being a 5 seed in this tournament, they've been ranked number 2 in the BPI. So something to keep an eye on there. Some notable matchups, of course, Villanova's played a lot more high-caliber opponents over the course of the season than Houston, and you can kind of use this to see how both teams have performed against the best opponents that they've faced over the course of the season. And Villanova, they lost to Baylor by 21, beat Tennessee by 18, lost to Purdue by 6. They were 2-0 against Providence, and lost to UCLA by 9. So, Villanova's played generally well. They had a close loss against Purdue. That Baylor loss was tough, losing to them by 21, but they beat Tennessee by 18, which was huge. They were 2-0 against Providence as well. So Villanova, once again, this is one of the toughest schedules that they've played in the country. So despite that, they've played, I would say, generally well. But for Houston, they've only played 3 teams that are in this tournament. They've played Wisconsin, Alabama, and Memphis. They lost to Wisconsin and Alabama, but both of those losses were within 2 points. I mean, they lost to Wisconsin by 2, lost to the Crimson Tide by 1, so both games were close. They could have easily flipped and would have been wins for Houston, and I mean, for all we know, if they would have beaten Wisconsin and Alabama, I mean, Houston, there's a good chance they'd be seeded like third or fourth in this tournament at least. But of course, they were both losses in the end. They were 1-2 against Memphis, so they did beat Memphis at one point this season. And if you look at outside of the tournament, they beat Oklahoma State by 11 and beat Oregon by 29. Some key points for this one: Villanova 29-7 overall, coming off of huge wins against Ohio State and Michigan once again. And this team, they're known to rarely make mistakes. And that's the thing about Villanova. This team is incredibly well coached. They rarely make mistakes. They're the best free throw shooting team in the nation right now, and potentially one of the best in history, just because their percentages are insane. So, I mean, if Houston gets down by, say, 5 or 6 and they need to start fouling Villanova to try to get back in the game, I mean, good luck, because Villanova's an incredible free throw shooting team, and I mean, they rarely make mistakes there, and they're excellent on both sides of the ball. Very consistent team. That's the thing about Villanova that is always super impressive. And for Houston, just upset Arizona. They've been dominant this tournament. I mean, this is as tough as it gets to pick a game here, because I mean, Houston is, I would say, playing slightly better right now versus Villanova. I mean, they just beat Arizona by 12, dominated them, and beat Illinois as well. And I mean, defensively, Houston is one of the best in the country. That has really come to their advantage. They only allowed 53 points against Illinois, allowed 60 against Arizona. The Wildcats are a really good team offensively. So, I mean, that was very impressive, and they're a very experienced team as well. Both teams have experience, but I mean, I like where Houston is, especially in experience. I mean, they got 4 of their starters, which are, I think all 4 of them are seniors, if I'm right. So, I mean, it's a huge opportunity here for Houston as an experienced team to make a run, and they already have made a run. They're in the Elite Eight, but I mean, this team could definitely go further. But that said, let's get to the prediction here for Villanova and Houston coming up here in the Elite Eight. I'm going to go with Houston, get the win here. 64-60 is my predicted final score, and this is as tough as it gets to pick a basketball game. That is for sure. I mean, you got so many factors here. Villanova, incredibly talented, very well coached. They rarely make mistakes, going up against Houston, who I just feel like is playing better right now, coming off of 2 massive wins, just dominated Arizona in the Sweet 16. I like Houston win this game. It is very close, though. I think it's going to be a close game, definitely defensive, and it's going to be low scoring. And I'm going to go with Houston 64-60. I just, once again, feel like this team they're playing better right now, and the way they're playing with their experience and everything, it looks good for Houston. Probably 51% towards Houston. So once again, just about as close as it gets here. Your over-under is 128. I'm going to take the under for this game and Houston to cover the 2-point spread towards them right now. But that said, let me know your thoughts and comments below on this game. Once again, it's pretty much as tough as it gets when it comes to picking a basketball game. So good luck if you're into betting or anything. But appreciate you guys all watching as always. Stay tuned for more from All Sports Central. Catch you on the next one.